Hello, everyone. My name is Pittsburgh Pat. This is Ryan Doyle, the Verdigris Table. How are you today, Ryan?
Good. So far, so good, man.
Good. How's everybody out there? All right. Well, we talk about D&D on this segment, and we both have channels where we post a lot of D&D stuff, and we generally talk about, um, what we did last night, what in our normal game, and how that could be used for DMs or players to strategize, get new ideas, especially with the new rules, and the new book. I'm sure the Monster Manual came out last week, and you pulled it out at one point, which was pretty awesome. In
Mm.
fact, you introduced we're doing Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and then suddenly there was an aboleth in the arena. How about that? See, the new Monster Manual always inspires new things, right?
Last night was a turning point, like a fulcrum, like a crossroads. And it
Mhm.
wasn't just there are two paths before you. It was very much the closing of one arc. I put a lot of pieces on the table to let the players kind of drive the course of things. It could have been for a couple different reasons. It could have been like the final night of the campaign. It could have been the spark of a new campaign. It could have been a spark of a different continuation of this campaign. There was a lot on the table, and I didn't know what the hell was going to happen next week. I still have to like figure out what's going to happen next week.
Yeah,
And
different
maybe that's a little
continuation,
more.
almost a different continuum.
Yes.
We found
I
this
that
otherworldly gate, and we could have gone into an entirely different plane of existence.
and that makes me excited sometimes. I do like to know what's up, what's going on, because I feel as a dungeon master, I am going to present a better story and game for my players if I have a very broad overview of like and a nuanced overview of what's going on in different places. Um, but every so often, I will not even paint myself into a corner, whatever the opposite of that cliche is, where I'll just like blow the gates wide open. I'm like, all right, here's some explosives and a lit match. Where are we going next?
Right, right. No, that was great.
So
So last night we dove down to this shipwreck where we were told there was an artifact, and we found that the artifact was actually attached to a gate, which led to another dimension where evil creatures were coming through, and necrotic shroud around it.
mm,
And we had a pretty fun plan. You actually at one point the players and thought that there might be a total party kill. So the classic D&D TPK could have happened, or at least you know some of our players got within. I think the monk played by Craig. I think he actually did lose all his hit points at one point, and then got laying on
he
hands.
dropped.
Yeah,
He rolled a nat 20 on his first death save, so he had one hit point.
or spare the dying.
Someone else had one hit point.
Right?
It
Yeah.
was
No, but
it was
somebody
a
made
nail
a death
biter.
save, didn't they?
Yeah, no, he did.
Oh,
He
yeah,
made a
yeah,
death
yeah.
save,
Okay.
and then he rolled a nat 20. He rolled a nat 20 on his first death save, which is
Nice.
wild.
Gotta love when that happens.
Yeah, that shifted the tone. So we're playing in a game shop. It is a fairly casual game by some measures, by necessity.
Hmm.
You know, we're hanging out, eating snacks, going up and back to the coffee bar. People are walking past the table constantly, some of whom we have relationships with. We're saying hi to people. We're like, what's
Oh,
going on
yeah.
over there?
One point, Tim came
Um,
over and whispered in my ear something like, embrace the dark side, or I don't even know what he said. I was like, always take fireball, something. So, yeah.
yeah, so it's a different level of immersion, let's say. And there
Right.
was a point where I was like, "Ooh, guys, did I do a bad job of like setting the tone here? Because like this is a boss fight. We know that, right? Like, so I will break that fourth wall. I mean, even in an immersive game, I'm willing to do that. But like, I want to make sure that the player and the characters are close together in understanding what's happening. And sometimes that means." As much as I try to talk to the character and get the player to embody the character, sometimes you got to talk to the player's level and be like, hey, boss fight, we are playing a game. here.
Yeah, and that way, we were already depleted of resources getting to this boss fight, and that's what happens in D&D. But when you get to the boss fight, you don't want to leave anything on the table. I mean, if you got that fourth level spell or sixth level, like I think at one point, the druid played by Mike, Snowfall at Dusk is her name, cast Witch Bolt at a fourth level, and so like that was a big deal. Um,
Guiding bolt.
or Guiding Bolt. I'm sorry, Guiding Bolt. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, and the new guy, Doug, who was playing with us as a bard, he pulled out what is it? Phantasmic
Phantasmal killer. Phantasmal
Phantasmal
killer.
Killer. Yes, that's it. Which
I
was
always get
doing
that
like,
and Invisible Stalker conflated. But yeah, Phantasmal killer is the spell.
yeah, and that's awesome. He was doing half damage with 4d10. So like even on a save, he was doing like 4d10 damage. That was crazy. Something crazy like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, like let's pull out all the stops and have us a boss fight. I didn't get to fight because I was sneaking around. So like being stealthy and having reliable talent at level 8 as a rogue is broken, we found out. So basically if you got a plus 10 and if you have so what reliable talent does, for those who don't know, and it's if you have a proficiency in a skill, then you can take any die roll from 1 to 9 and turn it into a 10. So
Hmm.
in my case, I have a plus 10 in stealth. So basically, I can't roll lower than a 20 in stealth. And I have plus 15 in sleight of hand because I have this magical item, the Gloves of Thievery, which give me plus 5 in that proficiency. So basically I'm rolling 25 on sleight of hand. So there was a sleight of hand check at one point. And it was like, so, think about this stuff. When you look at like mid-range levels, which is where a lot of D&D ends up, right? So like, you start out, maybe you start at level 1, maybe people start at level 3 because they want to be able to, have a little bit of subclass material there already. They have an idea where their character is going to go. They usually grow to what? Like, what is it? Level 12 is usually where is that the consensus
That's
on where
where that's what it feels like. That feels right to me. Like there's like 11 to 14. The game's like shaken apart and it's fun, but
your
you're
characters are
driving a
so powerful that like,
yeah.
the DM has to find scenarios to kind of actively thwart the characters, right? And maybe cater even like challenges to specific characters in order to make it more interesting for them. Otherwise, they're going to steamroll through everything, right?
Yeah, the game gets you get to God mode, which is fun for a stretch.
Yeah.
But for me eventually gets unsatisfying. And oftentimes the dungeon master is put in a position where like they have to try so hard to create any kind of challenge that it's very easy to overdo it because you've done it poorly so many times where just like oh this will get them and like it's not like they breeze through it like a house of cards
Right.
that you can like really stack the deck and get to a point where it's just like oh this is totally unfair now it's unfun in the other direction because yeah, I've had to pull out so many cheap tricks to even make this feel like a game anymore that yeah I don't know I talk a lot about how like high level D&D like 15 to 20 is good for a one shot but if you're and people do it all the time don't
Yeah.
get me wrong but
Yeah.
if you're looking at a character look at the low stuff to mid stuff even if you do reach high levels it's years away so if you're like grinding to get to like some capstone ability I mean if that's your form of fun more power to you but for me
Yeah.
that
It's
sounds like a
there.
real slog.
It's there for a reason, but yeah, I mean, if you just want to like make a bunch of 16 to 20 level characters and go through the Tomb of Horrors, like that can be interesting. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I think so back to the narrative, we found a one big bad boss, and he was like guarding this portal in kind of like this like in a sentry kind of way, but he was also kind of meditating too because he was kind of like warging or kind of like guiding his like undead minions on the assault on the island that we abandoned because we were doing the whole Sun Tzu thing, which is like hit them where they aren't. So we knew that this wave of like we were on an island. We knew that this wave of like undead were coming at us. So we like said, nope, we're going to dive down to what we think is the source. And we had all this special. We found this magic scuba diving kit with
Mm.
like pressure pills and you know breathe water, being able to breathe underwater spells and gadgets and things. So like, and then some of us had loaded up on magic items. Like a bunch of us had Cloak of the Manta Ray, and there was some talk about that as to what exactly that looks like. And I think there was a misinterpretation, but we went with it, I think. But like, if you look at the picture of Cloak of the Manta Ray, and I don't know if I can bring it up on my phone and show it on the screen, but the way it's depicted on D&D Beyond, uh, it looks almost like there might be a when you put the hood up, maybe there's like a little bubble of oxygen there, like you're wearing a diver's mask or a space suit or something like that.
Mhm.
But I don't know that that's what it actually is meant to be. I guess the way it's drawn, it's open to interpretation, but like this part right here,
Yeah.
is that like a faceplate or something? No, I don't think so. I think it's the back of the cowl. But anyway, it's magic. So like it could be like, you just have like this bubble of inexhaustible oxygen right in front of you. But so again, it's D&D, it's open to interpretation, but that was like something somebody wanted to do because the bad guy like eventually like well okay so let's do it in timeline. So my character, the rogue, sneaks into this um cavern where this guy's kind of guarding the gate and hanging out and running his minions and meditating sort of, and he has a passive perception unbeknownst to us of 20, but I
Mhm.
have that stealth of like 20 or something, so I actually rolled like a 24. And the bard actually gave me bardic inspiration because he was afraid I was going to get clipped as soon as I went into that cavern. Turns out he was right, but I didn't. I saved that bardic inspiration and never ended up using it. Like so many people do, like we get our resources and we don't use them. As I thought something else was coming up that was going to be a greater obstacle. And I wanted to save it for that because I was pretty sure my rogue was going to be stealthy enough to get past this dude. Anyway, he gets flushed out and he starts fighting the rest of the party. And there was this magical, terrible, like, I don't know, effluvium or whatever he like emits. And, and,
So he's half squid. He's the pirate captain, but like Ursula down below. So he's all
yeah,
tentacly, and he had necrotic ink cloud, I think is
uh,
the bold text.
yeah,
But it's like squid ink, but
r
it be nasty. Oh
really
yeah, and then the
nasty.
manta ray thing was like, can I be blinded by this if I have a face mask on? It's like, sorry,
Boom.
you're
That
blinded.
that was it. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the special abilities was blinded. See, blinded, I don't mind so much. I was playing in a D&D 2 weeks ago, Thursday. I was playing uh as a player in Adventure League, and the DM threw what was it? Paralyzed? No, stunned, I think. Something like that. Anyway, whatever he did, it was like no a wisdom saving throw or it was an intelligence saving throw. We were fighting the guy that's on the cover of the special cover of the monster manual, right? The
Mm-hmm.
guys that eat your brains. Um, and yeah, what was his name? The guys from Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, mind flayers.
Mind Flayers. They
They'll
also
lock
have
you up
the
and then.
they also have the
Hmm.
squiddy thing going on there too.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, but I was like, no, I don't like that. I don't like that state because it makes you make a wisdom saving throw and or an intelligence saving throw. And like that was my dump stat. So I was basically like, well, there's that. So what you did with it though was you made the blindness last for a round. And that was my
Hmm.
solution too to that was like, make it last a round Or maybe if you are like using really high level characters, then maybe enforce this special ability because it's something that the characters have a chance of succeeding at some point. But there was almost a total party kill in that campaign too, because the Mind Flayer started eating brains of the player characters, and fortunately, I was the last one standing and was able to cast a very high level shatter spell that was able to subdue these guys. And then we rounded up the bodies and went back to resurrect our friends. But um, after taking the brains out of this Mind Flayer's shattered remains.
Yeah, it's hard to come back from that. Yeah, mind flayers are like boss monsters. Like it's very rare that I use mind flayers plural. Shattered Obelisk actually is mind flayer centric towards the end, and like, yeah, I locked somebody up and ate their brain and was like, oof, that was nasty. No saves, no nothing. There's not a lot of,
No,
at
there's
least
no
like fifth
save.
edition D&D
Yeah.
that's like that.
Hmm. Yep.
And
And he,
there's still ways to get back, especially at higher levels. You can go find a cleric and get a diamond and bring your friends back, but
yeah, 10,000 gold piece diamond, I think is what it is, right? In order to do the
mm,
resurrect spell. So components, a lot of times components get ignored in D&D for spells, but like sometimes they're pretty central to especially the higher level ones. It's pretty central to the thing. Actually, Hero's Feast costs a lot too, I think. I don't know, it's a
you
10.
need a goblet? I think you need a golden goblet that's worth like a crazy amount, like a jeweled encrusted goblet worth like a
Oh,
ton of gold
okay.
pieces.
For some
I
reason,
think.
yeah, that was it. That's it. It's worth a lot, whatever that item is.
Yeah.
It's worth
I
a
don't
lot of.
think it gets consumed, but you need it to have it.
Oh, it
And
doesn't
we
get
learned
consumed? Oh, okay.
I don't think it gets consumed. I might be wrong about that. Yeah, there's two kinds. If it has a dollar amount, this is how I play.
Mm,
I would suggest enforcing it. If it has a dollar amount, you need to have it in order to cast the spell. But flip side, unless it's like we're talking about something crazy game breaking, like Dungeon Master has to provide opportunities for the player to have acquired that. And often I'll retcon it if like the player didn't realize until they're far from town that they leveled up, they took the spell, whatever. Oh shoot, there's some material component. Like, okay, yeah, we can hand wave that to a degree a lot of the time if you need protection from good and evil was going, and I think 15 GP worth of holy water, which the spell consumes. So
mm,
that is used up by the spell.
right.
And you had a paladin who had hours of downtime making holy water. Um, requires silver to make holy water, which the spell
Yeah.
consumes,
At one
but
point
he's a
yeah,
metallurgist, so he can powder silver for himself, and you guys have plenty of money. So it's just like, yes, we can say that these steps these steps took place, but like mark off your character sheet, like you spent the money and you had the time.
yeah, you were saying we actually had like kind of this assembly line of like materials that were like going, and actually that's the kind of thing that bastions could be used for, right? So like
Mm.
you could set up like a workshop in your bastion, which is in the new Dungeon Master's Guide, 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, and you could have that stuff going on so that when you're ready to go, you do have gallons of holy water if you need them, because we wanted to do something like that with a castle murder hole instead of like throwing lead molten metal down on top of enemy soldiers, which is the way it was used in medieval times apparently. We were going to like throw holy water on undead, and then we realized, well, the cleric can only make this much holy water and it takes him like an hour or several, I don't even remember how many, and we wanted gallons of it, and that wasn't going to happen without some kind of magic spell or something like that. So yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, so anyway, we find this yeah, so it was a great party fight. It was fun. I was prying off like the key to like this gate, and while I'm listening to these guys fight this epic battle, which was a lot of fun to be, it was fun to be uh listening to it. As opposed to like trying to strategize and see, because I knew what I was going to do next on my own, and to hear what these guys were doing as far as like trying to beat this guy without their rogue. So yeah, it was amazing they survived.
Yeah, quite a few things went right. I mean, one, I didn't know if you were going to get by him. Because like a 1v1 fight with him would have been tough. Well, I guess I wouldn't have stayed 1v1 for super long, but like you would have been
Right.
the brunt of all of his stuff for the first round, at least.
Well, that was the other
Um,
reason I went in because I have uncanny dodge now. So like I could have
mm,
taken half damage on things, but I was susceptible to necrotic damage going in because I failed
hmm
uh wisdom or constitution saving throw on the way down. I think it was wisdom. And yeah, and then the cleric gave me protection from good and evil. So that kind of like might have balanced it out. It would have given like disadvantage on attack rolls to the enemy, I think. Is that how that one was interpreted?
yes.
Yeah,
And it wasn't guaranteed that you were going to remove him from that space.
right. We had to
You
lure
guys
him
kind
out.
of, to a degree, bottlenecked him so there was less mobility because we're in three-dimensional space here. We're underwater, so you're adding the third dimension. Everyone can swim above and below each other,
Hmm.
which turns out makes things very hard to describe and depict.
Yeah, when you're
We
using
made it.
a grid map, it's, and you actually had like a couple, we had like a couple dice containers where we put somebody on top, and because I said I wanted to be near the ceiling, just to remind us where people were. But yeah, I mean, you almost need like a three-dimensional chessboard or something in order
Yeah,
to
there's a
do
level
it.
of abstraction because it's a tabletop role-playing game, and a table is a two-dimensional plane. So that third dimension you can do, but we there was like a lot of like there's a lot of Z-axis involved last night, but we got there. But yeah, it was not guaranteed that you were going to get him out of that cavern to the party. The bard did some clever, like a series of clever
Cantrips.
fake outs.
Yeah,
Can't yeah, with
yeah.
cantrips, with
He was just
cantrips,
using
dancing
cantrips.
lights and minor illusion and yeah, a
Prestidigitation
series.
or like
Yeah.
causing like currents in the water and noises and visual cues. And so, that's pretty cool. Like when you get to the point where you've expended a couple spell slots and you need to like do something, you get really creative with your cantrips, right? They don't cost anything. You can cast them at will.
Yeah, and the idea that these zero level spells are greatly affecting this what eighth level boss fight is yeah is meaningful. If you're smart about it, you can make it work. And there is, I mean, you guys didn't discover the consequences of it all. It's hard to prove the negative, right? But like
Mhm.
having the boss fight next to a functioning gate to some level of the abyss could have had consequences that might have changed the fight. He might have been able to reach in and pull something out of there or something.
Yeah, or just getting energy from it. So turning off the light switch, turning off that gate, and then like
hmm
taking down that shroud of darkness and evil
hmm
that he had surrounded himself with, made him either more vulnerable or certainly possibly made him less powerful. Yeah, it was a coordinated attack that actually worked. I mean, we're not really well known for our plans. We're more like, let's go in there and mess things up kind of guys, which is a fun way to play D&D. But today, at last night's session, I should say, we really deliberated about it. We probably thought about this for 40 minutes before we took any actions. We're just sitting there discussing like possible scenarios, asking for descriptions. How does that feel as a DM? Like, how do you deal with basically being interrogated about a locale or a situation until ad nauseum, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's the stuff that I used to step on, or I have in the past like r rushed through that, tried to like up the tension, like oh you guys you don't necessarily have time to talk about this stuff, but in game you did to a degree, like you didn't have I had said like 10 minutes had passed instead of the 40 minutes. But yeah, that is something that I've been learning and leaning on more and more, just like creating the space for you guys to talk and deliberate. And like there's a degree of metagaming to it, I suppose, but like you're still dealing with what the character's capabilities are,
Mhm.
right? The player conversation is a funhouse mirror of the in-character conversation. And again, we run a fairly casual game because of the environment and a fairly strategic game. Like you guys know, I'm rolling in the open. You
Hmm.
know that like it's not just the narrative or focus wins. Like the numbers here matter. Someone could die, right? So for me to not give you that space also feels unfair.
Right.
So it is something I practiced and gotten better at. It does require some patience and I don't even know trust in the process and the players. To like, I am going to give you all of the information your character would know to make to like close that gap between the character and the player.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you tell me what's going on. There's other times where I will hit the gas, but like here, especially it was the start of a session, it took a while to like. You guys did a very good job discovering what was up too. Like you sent the familiar down there at the cost of his life.
Yeah, the
Ever
little
touched the
squid.
familiars?
Yeah, we sent a little octopus in there, and the squid guy just basically went squish,
Yes.
squished him out of the
Had
distance.
you not done that, right? If it was like roll initiative, you're face to face with this boss guy, and then you wanted to have a 45-minute planning conversation about how you're going to fight him, that I would have not allowed, right? But you guys had run
Sure.
reconnaissance and were preparing the battlefield and making a plan, and like narratively, that's what you did. So real world, you have that time, and I'm not. I don't know. People would have like sans timers, right? Like, all right, you got 10 minutes or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
that works sometimes, but I
I've
think,
tried to do that. That can be you know, it's every I don't know if it's every, but it's a lot of DM's dream that they can like speed up combat. That's like the big thing, right? Can you make combat faster, right? Can you make it action oriented? Can it look like a you know, Fast and Furious movie or something? And there's ways that I've tried to do that in the past. I've tried to use timers, I've tried to use things like, you know, alarms. Um, None of them really worked too well. There is that you did a scenario once where we were in a house that was going to kind of fall apart or implode or something like that. And
mm,
you did a timer for every round. And you kind of kept track of that on your in your workbook. And that's like a narrative timer. But in order to like translate into real world, in fact, the scenario 2 weeks ago I was talking about where the DM at Adventure League, he wanted the boss fight with the Mind Flayer to be really fast, but then it was a boss fight, so it slowed down because everybody was looking at their sheets and trying to figure out what their best move was, and it wasn't anybody's fault. It's just that was the nature of that's just the nature of human beings, right? We're going to play, we're going to look for optimization against like a terrible enemy. You know, that so then he kind of either forgot that or he abandoned it. But I think what happened was he paralyzed or banished enough people to another dimension that there were fewer players to actually have active rounds. And that sped up the fight, but then it got to the point where like I was the only one left. And you know, how fun is that for the player? You know, if the player's like not able to do anything except watch, you know, like I said, I was having fun watching those guys, you know, do things in combat without me. But I think I would dare say that most players, you know, they want to be involved in every round of combat if possible. So,
and you were doing other stuff. And again, this
yeah,
circles back to like why high level D&D can kind of break down because to get the monsters to a commensurate level to the player characters, especially after, a decade of power creep, the monsters have to do what the players are doing. And it turns out, hey, it's not like being stunned is not fun. Losing a round of action isn't fun. Sitting at the table for 45 minutes, not doing anything. Not because you're working on something else. Like your character was defusing the bomb, right? While the combat was
right,
going on. Your character wasn't floating in a gray expanse of nothingness, hoping, I'm going to roll one die every 45 minutes. And I need an 18. And if it's less
right,
than 18, I guess I'm no longer playing this game. And yeah, that's not fun for most people.
right. Yeah, that's the thing. And it's so how do you engage, you know, the players? And you do it through descriptive narration, you know, do you, I mean, you know, when you get to that level where you've got like a boss that's got three attacks and a legendary action and can teleport and like you know it just you know the boss is that when the monster's actions take long enough a turn and you're a lot of times what'll happen is D&D I'm sorry DMs will often just be like they want the players to have fun, so they want the players to have a turn, so that when they do the monster stuff, they're just basically like rolling damage. They're just basically like, oh, and you take 24, and oh, you save, so you take 12. So, and by the way, you have blue rot now, and oh, by this, that, and the other, and like and that's, but so I guess what happens, what I try to do, and what I see you do well is what I think you do well is that you do very descriptive things, right? So when the ink jet comes out and it's a cone, it's a downward cone of 30 feet, like I can visualize that in my mind, when you talk about the blue rot and how, oh, you don't have any immediate effects, but you feel like, you're sick. It's like when you catch a cold or the flu or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm not sick now, but tomorrow I'm going to be feeling this. Like, sometimes the day before you're down and out that you're going to be down and out. And that's a really neat way to describe it. So, yeah, so that's engaging, and that makes it more, I don't want to say palatable, palatable for
The
lack of a better
opposite.
word. Yeah, the opposite of that. So,
But yeah,
yeah,
like
but
impactful.
it
And
engages you.
I think leaving room for that, you know, slow down of the 40 minutes of planning actually created a more cinematic battle because you knew what you were doing. You had processed a lot of your options already. You had
Yeah.
some like theories to test, right? But and no plan survives contact with the enemy, especially in this game. But it moved much faster, I think, because you had spent that much time and either like, because you had developed a plan or because like even subconsciously you're like, okay, the time for talk is over. Like now is the action phase of things. It's like so much more high contrast.
Mm,
It was a pretty cinematic, nail-biting boss fight that moved. There's a world where that fight took 3 hours.
right.
And it did. I mean, I think it probably maybe it took 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It's still high level D&D with casters and everything and a spotlight shifting back and forth.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it felt like it moved on my side of the thing.
And then at the end of the boss fight, you introduced an aboleth into the mix,
Well,
which I thought was
well,
cool.
I introduced the possibility. I set the table. So you guys have a gate,
Hmm.
and depending what like, I kept calling it a key, but that's not quite the perfect analogy. But like, there's a space, and the thing that you ripped out was this like weird holy symbol of the shadow
Orcus.
that was
Yeah.
Orcus, and that was like aiming this gate at the abyss, creating this necrotic effect that was raising these pirates. You removed that, making him like dropping that unhallowed ninth level zone, making him radiant, making him susceptible to radiant damage, which moved things along quite a bit, especially with like whatever that what fourth level guiding bolts was a ton of damage at the end there. Um, and then you discovered another key, essentially. One character has what they think might act as a key to the
Hmm.
Feywild, and their
Hmm.
backstory, their plot is that they are hoping to return to the Feywild, which is not necessarily an easy task always. And in the pirate's booty, in the giant treasure chest at the end, among a bunch of, gold and jewels and little statuettes of sea creatures made out of jade, you found this very bizarre looking thing that would fit there. And after figuring out that like it was supremely weird, right? You got a fair amount of information. Like the paladin has smithy proficiency, is a metallurgist, has done some pretty has close to that in real life too, has a lot of real world knowledge, which has been very cool to see. Um, so I described this like it looks like Damascus steel. It's clearly like an alloy, but like you recognize neither of these metals or like how you could actually physically make a thing like this. Like it's confusing. It doesn't make sense, and it's just very weird. And you guys notched it into the little flux capacitor holder in the gateway and opened a gate, which I was like, I don't know if you're gonna do that or not. I don't know if you're gonna go through it or not, but sure enough,
That
that's
was
what happened.
poetic. That was really poetic the way you described that as kind of this alien material, like as if you found
Mm,
something that was otherworldly, something that you knew was an alloy. It probably acted like metal, but you didn't know either the constituent components, like is it copper and tin? No, it's not. But like, but you could tell, but even trying to do that, you said like warped your mind a little bit in order, trying to
hmm
get your head around the fact that this even is in existence is a thing. And yeah, being able to narrate in that way gives a great sense of mystery and intrigue and the idea of like these are other dimensions. You're going through this gate, you're going to other planes of existence or something completely utterly off the material plane. And you know when you said the bard went through, and there was a funny moment there where originally the paladin's like, here, tie this rope to me and I'll go through the gate and then you guys can pull me back. And I said to the bard, here, hold this. And he's like, okay. And he takes the rope and he walks through. And originally I thought that was going to be both of them walk through and then there's no way for them to get back. But that's not, that which I thought would have been hilarious. But it turned out the other way around where the bard ends up seeing this otherworldly plane, which you described really well as like this sun, which was actually an eye that kind of like turns towards them and looks at him with malevolence. And instead of saying like it, the greeting, instead of being hello, is more like I see you, you know, which I thought, that's a really great way to describe that. It reminded me of Klingon, conversational Klingon, right? Where, Klingons don't say hello to each other. They say basically, what do you want? You
hmm
know, that's the
hmm
Klingon introduction, translates as what do you want?
In my Dungeon Master career, have spent a lot of time thinking about and differentiating the like aberrations far realms because like naturally again it's almost like the Z-axis, right? There's a very clear like higher planes, lower planes, good and evil, and like this is celestial and this is fiendish, and okay, demons and devils are different things that are conflicting, but they're very similar. All of that's going on. The Feywild, the Shadowfell is like the X-axis, and then there's this whole other thing. And like, how do you make that other thing feel distinct from the abyss and the heavens, and just like bizarre and alien? How do I give it? I always give it like a little. It's like Cthulhu-y and like almost sci-fi vibes. It's like, oh, you've stumbled into a different genre. It is so weird and different. Um, and yeah, and he failed his first save, so he was essentially charmed in a way.
Hmm.
And he welcomed slash invited. I like playing with like, translation. Like you don't quite understand these words, but like the gist is invite me in.
Right.
And he says, yeah, right this way. And this aboleth just like swam through the portal. And I was like, part of me was like, yes, did it. Because I didn't just like force that upon you. It's not like, oh, you didn't close the gate in time. Um,
Surprise. Yeah.
Surprise! Like you guys did that. You opened the gate to another realm, went in there to mess around,
Even
and
the
then
way
like
you
invited
just
something back.
even the way you described the creature, you described it as having like trilateral symmetry, right?
Mm,
So instead of like, us, bilateral symmetry, well, it's more like a starfish, which has radial symmetry, but like you did more like a three-dimensional symmetry. And so, and then you even had the eyes be triangular, right? Three triangular eyes. Love that. That was just that was a beautiful touch, I think. And then having Patrick the Paladin come into contact with it, and it's gooey, slimy, it's like ectoplasmic almost or something. It's not something that you would encounter even, like ooze or slime here in the normal material plane of D&D level kind of thing. That was really well described too, I thought.
Yeah, that was a wild moment. He This thing swims through the gate. You guys don't know what's going on. You don't see the other side of this portal.
Right.
You see this like shimmery kind of like a wave pattern, like a standing wave effect, and then the other side, as far as you can tell, is like the rest of the room. You're seeing the other side of the gate.
Mhm.
So this thing swims out, looks you over to see if it's worth bothering with you, decides it's not, and is swimming away. And he's like, "Can I shove it back in?" And I was like, "You can certainly try. Let's get like we're in a very rules centric interpretation right now because we do have like 2014 and 2024 at the table. 2024 supersedes 2014. A lot of things have changed, some things haven't. So like we broke out the books, we made sure like we were doing things to a T. I really like to understand rules as written
Yeah.
to interpret rules as intended before I start changing things. I want to know what the book says before I just like make a call. I'll often just make a call if it's not, but it's like sometimes that actually builds tension. That didn't, at least from where I was sitting, it didn't like take away from the moment. It like we it built up the moment. Okay, here's where to establish all the rules. It's a contested strength check. I'm gonna roll. He was about to roll. I was like, let me roll first. I
Right.
am setting the DC for you. Let's get it. The number on the table, like here's the bar to cross. And I rolled quite high. I think it was like plus 20 because I he was a fairly strong monster. I rolled pretty good. So I think it was like over 20. And I was like, oh no, he's not, there's no way.
He's not going to
And
budge, right? But the
yeah, and
paladin
sure
rolled
enough,
even higher. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
he
that's
pulled
the
it
thing.
off.
Right? So that's a contested role in the old school rules. Well, in the D&D 2014 rules, but in the 2024 rules, shove falls under unarmed strike, and you can do a dexterity. What happens is you shove, the target makes a dexterity saving throw.
Hmm.
So that's how that works, and it can and the target gets to choose if it's strength or dexterity. So that's interesting. And then if it fails, it gets pushed 5 feet away or falls prone. And the DC for the saving throw is 8 plus the push, whoever's doing the shoving, their strength modifier and proficiency bonus. So so
Yeah,
that's
it's a
that's
save against their
yeah,
DC.
it's a little more complicated. I like the contested roles. I just like that idea uh, with modifiers, but um, because that introduces an element of luck into it, I think that I can play with as a DM, and I can say like there was an obstacle or there was a reason why, or you go to shove him and you accidentally put your thumb in his eye, or something that could like explain the failure,
Mm.
um, something like that can work narratively. But yeah, but these, like you said, rules as rewritten play one way and rules as previously written play somewhere else. So it's one of those Wild West times where we get to play with the rules. We get to pick and choose what we want. And that's always true at any like table that's not like an official structured event. But yeah, we're trying to learn these new rules. And that's, one of the reasons we do these videos. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's rolled out a 2014 character. He hasn't touched the
Yes.
new stuff. So
Mhm.
like in a sense, you guys are playing different games. And it does feel like a cohesive whole, but there are moments like that where I'm like, all right, for you, this is
Yeah.
how this works.
Yeah.
For them, it would be something else.
Right.
and it's been interesting. Again, I don't know the next campaign. I don't think things are gonna work. I'm gonna push everybody to one side or the other of that line.
Mhm.
But it's been an interesting experiment. We've learned a lot through it.
There was another rule that came up that I didn't pull the trigger on this, but I thought about it because once we got that key, as you called it, that symbol of Orcus off of the gate, and eventually, just to wrap up, once Patrick pushed the paladin pushed the aboleth back in,
Mm.
we took that plate off. So now the paladin, who is also a metallurgist, or metallurgist if you're British, he has that now, and he's going to try to, like, I don't know, reverse engineer it or something, or look for something that looks like it, study it, and see if he can make it. But at one point, I asked the group if we needed to destroy the symbol of Orcus so that no one can use this gate in that particular fashion again. And actually, I thought of trying to destroy the gate itself. And immediately, Snowfall at Dusk, she's Fae. She wants to go to the Feywild. I think she wants to use that gate. So she was like, no, 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 no. I want to use. So, uh, but here's something I have up my sleeve that maybe if I forget at the appropriate time, you can even remind me some point down the road. I have a bag of holding, and I threw the Orcus symbol in there. I also have a handy haversack.
Mhm.
So if you put a handy haversack in a bag of holding, what happens?
Depends who you ask, but it tears a hole in reality and everything goes away, including
Yeah,
things that are
yeah,
proximal
yeah.
to that explosion.
It does. In fact, I looked up the haversack thing, and so it says it only weighs 5 pounds, which is important. The bag of holding weighs 15. So that's important with what I was going to do, so yeah, the other thing is that the stuff that's in those containers gets either destroyed or, yeah, it gets destroyed, and a hole to the astral plane opens up, and anything within 10 feet, any creature within 10 feet gets sucked through it, and it's a one-way trip, and then the hole's gone, right? So the gate closes. But but I was thinking, okay, well, that if I do that, it will destroy the um, um, the symbol of Orcus. However, it says here in the haversack things, it's very specific about it. It says if the haversack is overloaded or if a sharp object pierces it, tears it, the haversack ruptures and is destroyed. It also says if the haversack is destroyed, its contents are lost forever, although an artifact always turns up again somewhere. So you can't destroy, it's like being in a video game where you can't destroy a quest item, Like it's just not in the code to like to destroy it in that way. So that would not have worked once I looked this up, and that's one of the things. But the other thing was I was going to use my mage hand in order to push the sack into the bag of holding because
Hmm.
you can't do it the other way around because if you look up mage hand, 10 pounds is the limit of what it can pick up and
Mm.
carry, but it does have a 30-foot range. So you could be more than 10 feet away from it when the flash into, the gate into the astral plane opens up. So for those of you out there that ever want to do this, like it's not exactly a nuclear bomb in your pocket, but it's a way to maybe if you set this off near an invincible enemy or something, you could, at least get rid of them, flash them to the astral plane. So you're more than welcome to steal that idea. Not that that's an original. I'm sure other people have come up with that idea, but that was the first time I came up with using those three components at the same time. But it won't destroy the artifact. The artifact will turn up somewhere. And I like the idea of like, they're already giving like sort of giving advice, DM advice through that description. Like,
Hmm.
use this, like make sure that this thing that they're trying to get rid of just comes back. It's like that magic stone that one of our characters had at one point where you throw it and then it's back in your pocket. It's not a
Hmm.
boomerang. It doesn't physically come back. It's just you throw it and then suddenly, how'd it get back in my pocket again? That kind of thing.
Yeah,
Extra dimensional.
the cursed luck stone.
The cursed luck stone. That's it. Yeah, absolutely. So, so we were talking about esoterica, and you mentioned something about this painting that I
Yeah,
did.
man, I
Like,
love it. I love the art. I loved it before I knew you made it. I didn't know that was
I did that
in your
20,
wheelhouse.
probably 20 years ago. I painted that. But yeah, it
And
has
I
the
recognize the rep. So you have, I mean, you have a green, um, Valley of the Kings with the Nile, and the Nile lines up with the Milky Way,
right.
which happens at a very specific point because of the, oh boy, I might be getting this wrong because it's been a long time since I've read this book, but the succession of the equinoxes. The world spins and it rotates around the sun, but it also wobbles. Again, it's that z-axis. There's that third thing that gets harder to consider spatially. So what the North Pole is actually pointed at Polaris now, but that was not always the case. So we can kind of figure out a lot of astronomically aligned ancient architecture based on this fact that the sky actually does move around a little bit in the this great cycle. So when the Milky Way lines up with the Nile in that perspective, and the sun is rising in Leo, which and the Sphinx is looking at that. It's a little controversial, but supposedly the three Great Pyramids line up with Orion's belt, which are two very bright stars. And then that third star is like a little off center, like off the line that I would draw, and a little bit smaller. So there you go. There is this concept that they did that on purpose and were pointing at this date, which turns out is about 12,000 years ago. And a gentleman named Graham Hancock, in part inspired by that realization. By what do you remember the guy's name who wrote the Orion prophecy?
Robert, I want to say Bauman, Bauman. Is that right?
I
It's
found this book as a young impressionable man in or a teenager, I think, in a used bookshop.
hmm
And perhaps because my name is Ryan, I picked it up. I was like, "What is the Orion prophecy?" And it was a convincingly laid out argument. The argument gets taken a step further by Graham Hancock, among others, that it's not only pointing at that date, or it's actually inscribing the date it was created, making these incomprehensibly old things. Like Cleopatra is closer to the invention of the iPhone than the Great Pyramids. These things were ancient in ancient Egypt by our
hmm
current understanding of things.
hmm
I'm already out on a limb here. So the
No,
reason we
this
date,
is all stuff that I've heard as well. And actually what I called that painting was 10,000 BC.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
So we read the same book or saw the same documentaries. And yeah, and what's really and then they think that the Sahara was like a grassland and it was lush and like at that time the weather patterns were different, just certain which is certainly possible. I mean, I have no problem with that. And they found things, that they found some evidence that made that the Sahara was wetter in the past. Um, the thing about Graham Hancock and the jumping to the conclusion that the pyramids are 12,000 years old or so, that I have an alternate theory that
Mhm.
would help to explain the layout on the ground. And there are other pyramids that also would correspond. There's been photographs taken of, I don't know if they're satellite photographs, but maps assembled where they like other stars correspond to other locations of pyramids and other structures in ancient Egypt. And but what my thought is that maybe, and this is just a theory, maybe the high priests, maybe when they went in, once a year, like the Pharaoh goes into this holy of holies, this secret chamber, I guess somewhere in, I don't remember where it was exactly, Thebes or Saqqara or somewhere, and And he goes in, and I think a couple high priests go in with him, or maybe only he goes in. Maybe somebody somewhere around 12,000 years ago made a plan, an architectural blueprint or a plan for
Mm.
building. And then eventually each successive pharaoh or generation like added to that plan. And so that's why things were situated where they are and in accordance to this kind of like blueprint. Now, maybe the blueprint was made then. Maybe the pyramids are still, maybe the Great Pyramid still was built in 2650 BC, but you know, but it was according to a much older plan. So that for me helps to reconcile the the archaeologists, the Egyptologists' assessments with the more radical like ancient civilization, very ancient civilizations ideas. But I haven't heard anybody say that, to
That's
my
interesting.
knowledge. Yeah, but it's just a thought, you know.
And that still implies like what are we talking about? An 8,000 year
Yeah,
transmission of art, crazy accurate, mathematically complex,
sure.
what architectural schematics.
Oh, there's no
Uh,
doubt. I mean, when you talk about like true north and they talk about like, the alignments of the pyramids and things of that nature and how square they are and using, I mean, there's no doubt, no matter how they did it, even if they just did it with plumb lines and sticks and right angles, it's still amazing, like it's an amazing achievement. So, I don't, you know, it's just it's unbelievable. And to stick with any plan for that length of time or any length of time, even if it's, a shorter span than 10,000 years or 12,000 years, it's still amazing that that was able to be accomplished, with consistency. But, it was a civilization that was fairly uh, isolated, not as prone to attack and conquest as like the
hmm.
Euphrates Tigris Valley, or or the Peloponnesus, with the Mycenaeans. So you had that opportunity for consistency, um, but
And
it's
it's such I just yeah, so I don't have a dog in the fight
right.
so much as I like the world being reinvested with mystery and magic. We are at a point in history where we feel like we got a pretty good grasp on a lot of things,
Mhm.
and that's pretty new in a lot of ways. And I think maybe there's a dash of hubris there. The Great Pyramid was the tallest object, man-made object on the planet up until the Eiffel Tower was constructed, which in the grand scheme of things is not very long ago. So,
Nope.
100 years ago, 200 years ago, these things were ancient marvels that we could not recreate. We are among the first people to be like, oh, yeah, we could do that, even though technically we couldn't.
Right.
Maybe if America spent its entire military budget trying to construct one of those things, they'd make a pretty good facsimile, but it might not be as exacting as this thing is. And the reason we date it is because it's got some guy's name on it. It's got Khufu's name on it. It's got a pharaoh's name is inscribed on it.
Mhm.
And that is the main piece of evidence that, like, okay, this is the guy that built it. The current governor's or mayor's name is on the bridge down the road. He didn't build that thing. They change that every they take off the old guy's name, put on the new guy's name every time they rotate who's in charge.
Good point.
Um,
Yeah.
Also, the common knowledge, the common wisdom is that these are burial sites. This is a tomb, and I mean that's kind of compelling in some ways, except we've never found a body. There's no, everyone thinks there's mummies in the pyramids. I mean, if there were, the idea is that they were taken long in deep antiquity,
Right.
but there's never been a mummy found in those pyramids. And another interesting thing about the Great Pyramids is that they're the best ones. This idea of like a culture evolving and getting better and better and better seems intuitive, just like this instinctual evolutionary process of getting better and better at constructing these things.
Sure.
The newer ones are much worse. These crappy mud brick ones are actually more recent. There's somehow this like loss of prowess and technology and understanding. And nowhere else is the oldest version of the thing the grandest, best, most impressive version of a thing. There's this like total lack of evidence of like an evolutionary through line. It actually goes the other way. So something's weird about them. Let's put it that way. I'm not saying I know that they were built at the end of the Younger Dryas or built to point to some future event.
Right.
I'm just saying we don't know. And the idea that it's written in a textbook doesn't mean the case is closed.
Right, right. And even how they were built, there was a recently pretty good documentary about a French architect who kind of has a theory they were kind of built sort of from the inside out.
Mm,
Um, and this way you don't need this great big spiral ramp or a long ramp, uh, which would have more material than the pyramid itself in order to, keep the slope at a working level. Um, that so there's new theories all the time. It's also my understanding that the Great Pyramid is older, like you said, it's older than than Khafre's pyramid, the one next to it, which is also very similar in size, but slightly smaller. And then Menkare's, which is um, even smaller, was built after that, but with a lot of precision as well. So that implies, and I think Bauman might come to this, but conclusion, but that implies to me that there is a plan, right? Because if you could,
mm.
like you said, if you can build one this big, why not try to build one even bigger or even bigger or even bigger, And so, you know, I don't know. I'm just saying, like it seems logically consistent with the idea. It was like, okay, pick apart, pick a part of this plan and build it. And I don't know that there was any specific order, but like when possible, maybe. Um, I do know that like the step pyramid, like the first one, right, at Saqqara, which has, I don't know how many, it's 7 levels. Um, that one is thought to be a burial mound because,
Hmm.
or a tomb because the individual components were burial mounds. What do they call them? It starts with an S. I forget now. Um, and they were just kind of stacked one on top of another, and that's why it has that step shape. but yeah, but I know there's a lot of speculation as to like who was buried where and were there people buried in pyramids and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's it's a it's it's fun to think about. I just like the idea that like there's um there's a long human history that might be longer than we think, and there's a
Mm.
lot of stuff that wasn't written down and we just don't know. And we're just not 100% sure, we're not 100% sure about. There's another really great thing done by great work done by an historian about like, when Egypt was invaded, one of the few times it was invaded in ancient history by a group called the Hyksos, what they called the Sea Peoples. And a lot of civilizations kind of collapsed around the same dates within like 100 years. There were a lot of, and they think that there were these raiding parties that came from maybe the Western Mediterranean and wreaked havoc on, the Near East civilizations, um, and even as maybe as far away as the Mesopotamian civilizations. But again, it's a theory. Um, there's a lot of historical evidence that says there was a lot of turmoil at that period of time. But you know, there isn't a lot of evidence, right? There's not a lot of archaeological evidence. There's a lot of um, written, a lot of stuff is inferred from written accounts. And it's interesting to see how much we rely on written word and not archaeology. So for instance, like in 218, no, I'm sorry, 216 BC, the Romans and the Carthaginians fought one of the most famous battles of history, the Battle of Cannae, right? And they still don't know to this date where that took place. There is like a battlefield monument there, like there is like a place you can go visit, but and that's generally agreed that that's where it happened, but there's no, to my knowledge, there's no archaeological evidence. There are no broken swords, there's no metal, there are no coins, there's no armor, there's nothing that was found there. And in fact, there's still a lot of conjecture as to which direction the the opposing sides were facing and on which
Mm.
side of the river they were. Because if you use the written accounts in Polybius and in Livy, there's some conflict, and depending on which side of the river you start on, then that messes up whether one was facing south and one was facing north. Was the Volturnus wind coming from the southeast at that period of time? And was the sun in the eyes of the Roman general? And that's why, this happened, and, all kinds of craziness. So, and I've read extensively on that subject. And there's one guy who did a doctoral thesis on that and just has this great map where he overlays like 10 different historians' ideas of how this battle took place. And it's like, take your pick,
Mm.
there's arguments
Yeah,
for all of them.
it's it's wild how much we still have to learn and are constantly learning. Like Troy was thought to be imaginary, right? That was thought like Homer invented this place until fairly recent, like super fairly recently in the grand scheme of things, in
Right.
historical context. Like I made a video that did very poorly. One of my worst like to dislike ratios. It like triggered a lot of people apparently, which I was confused about. But like human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, have been around for 150,000 years. Conservatively, there's evidence, controversial evidence that you could double that number, but like we've been us for a very long time, right?
Mhm.
The sliver of human history that we know about written is a tenth of that time, if we're being super generous, super generous, right? We're talking, the Orion prophecy is right, if that is from 12, 13,000 years ago, the Grand Pyramids, and like that's still like 10% of human history. So
Right.
there was a point where we were running around and there were other things that weren't Homo sapiens that were quite a bit like us running around. And we get together every week to talk about this game where there's other things that are a lot like people. There's a bunch of other humanoids out there.
Mhm.
There are dwarfs and there are Goliaths. There are these things. And I didn't even argue the point so much as like open for consideration, like perhaps this like genetic memory of sharing a planet with Neanderthals and we keep discovering other varieties of
Hominids. Yeah.
hominids, and like our ancestors were commingling with them, fighting them, vying for resources, and other ways of commingling. Like I've got Neanderthal DNA in me, right?
Hmm. Sure.
Like I'm a half orc. Like what the hell?
Hmm.
So that all really happened. So like this fantastical game that we're playing is actually a little closer to reality than I think a lot of people think. And even if you disagree with all of that and it makes you angry for some reason I don't understand, it's a great place to get inspiration for your world building, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you can look at that. Certainly, if you look at some of the names of characters, planets, settings, things like that. Um, in like Star Trek, a lot of those come from historical um, references. Captain Picard at one point goes undercover and calls himself Galen, right? Well, Galen was a famous like doctor, in the ancient Greek world, so or the ancient Roman world, and I mean, like that's just Romulans, Romulus, right? That's
Hmm.
there's no, um, not too
And their
much hiding
brothers,
that. They're talking about
if you
a
squint,
Roman
their brothers.
Empire kind of thing,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's no, it's yeah, you can allow that to inspire you, and like you said, build your own world. and the thing is, you can have fun with these ideas, I think, and not necessarily have to be a 100% um, convert, right? So, like, I'm open to many ideas, many scenarios. We just had the Super Bowl, right, on Sunday. And there were at least three commercials that I can remember that had some kind of alien motif to it, which
Mm.
my conspiracy friends all say, like, they're getting us ready. They're getting us ready, for the announcement. And it's like, I'll keep my mind open to the idea that, you know, it's a possibility. I'm not, I don't, I'm not saying that I'm 100%, it's like, where did the Battle of Cannae take place? Well, I have my idea of that from reading a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm only about like 70% committed on to which scenario I actually believe. Um, and I've done a lot of reading on it. So that's something that I've really investigated. I'm still just a little better than 50-50 on it. So, I'm willing to change my mind in the face of new facts and evidence. But, you know, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence too, right? So,
Mm.
you know, um, you gotta
So says our Lord and Savior,
you gotta be
Carl Sagan.
yeah, I gotta be convinced, right? You gotta convince me. So like, but in
And
the
that's
absence of all that, I can like have theories and change those. That's totally fine. But
and that's a sign of a healthy mind, in like an evolved mind, in my estimation. Just being able to entertain, to consider something, to
mhm.
being open to something is huge because, like, we're not the first people to have it all figured out. Everyone who came before us had all sorts of crazy crap in their heads that they were believing, but us, this tiny pinprick of history, this is the time we've got it all figured out. So, like, being leading into that discomfort of being open to being wrong
Right.
and understanding that your convictions are just, in a lot of cases, probabilistic estimations is sometimes scary, but I think is an honest way to live and is going to put you in a position to learn things and have fun with ideas in a way that you can't if you are rigid in your understanding of how everything is.
And you might be more resilient when things do change, or if your mind
Mm.
does change, you might be more apt to be able to adapt to that because you've already entertained the possibility that could happen. So, you know, like a psychological defense, maybe. I don't know. But
Yeah, I mean,
or a coping tool. I don't know. Something like that.
the only constant is change.
That is
Egypt
true.
was it was a verdant grassland at some point. They didn't build those in an arid desert to start. I mean, maybe
No,
they
that's
did,
how they
but
were preserved, right? So because there wasn't a lot of erosion, right? But we can get into that another day. The water erosion on the side of the Sphinx. That'll be a topic
mm,
for another one. But we could do a whole series of these. But back to D&D. Thanks for hosting, DMing last night. Thanks for being part of this wonderful weekly broadcast that we have. And thank everybody in the audience for watching us. If you have any comments, go ahead and throw them in there. We love hearing comments. And we'll see you next week with any luck. Roll the dice.